Before I begin, I want to tell a little story that happened yesterday or in rehearsal. So when this circle appeared, the TED circle that everybody loves, they were like, do not step on it with your shoes. And so I took off my shoes and I stepped on the circle with my bare feet, and it was amazing. It was heaven. So forgive me if I don't have my shoes for the talk. That actually feels really nice. Okay. Do you know what is the smallest butt in the world? You don't? Well, you will in a second. Before I begin for real, there is something you need to know about me. I have a stammer. If you hear it's help by words and letters, that's just the way that I speak. Naturally, it's a kind of a part of the package. I might not stammer much either, as stammering is weird. Anyways, so my brother, he's 6 years old. He comes up to me one day and asks me this very question. And he was looking at me really excitedly. And so I naturally answered, I don't know. What? And he said, two patterns stuck together. And I was like, amazing. And then he continued, do you know what is the biggest butt in the world? And I was like, no, what? And he said, two galaxies stuck together. And it's easy to think like, oh yeah, he's just a kid being silly, yeah, they do that. But to me, that was an example of him trying to do science communication in a weird and wonderful way. And today, I will be talking about how we can develop a perhaps unconventional, but also a lot more interesting and effective way to talk about science and trust in science. A bit about what I do. I study science communication at University College London, and I work with the BBC making short educational videos like these ones. I interview pigeons, I have bonus conversations with moths, I make some cool animations. But yeah, this is about what I do. I did biology for my undergrad, and after graduation, I was like, all right, well, I'm ready for my next step. But I didn't exactly know what my next step was. Ideally, I would know that before I graduate, but I didn't, so I took a gap year. And a goal of that gap year was to find the answer to the question, what is it that I want to do? What is my next step? And how the hell do I find my career path? And I come from a science background, and specifically the type of science that's full of lab coats and flasks and glasses and all that, and where any issue, no matter how hard, can be solved with peer-reviewed papers, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, and just like analysis and logic. And I knew immediately how I wanted to solve the question of finding my career path, just like that, with my brain, analysis, and all that. And no matter how many videos and articles I consumed, no matter how many career directions I explored, no matter how many pros and cons lists I made, nothing felt quite right. Like my head was now filled with knowledge, but I still had no clue what I really wanted to do. So I decided to switch things up. And instead of focusing on my brain and my thoughts, I would focus on my heart and my feelings. Now, I've always been quite skeptical of delegating such important decisions to my heart, because my heart doesn't want to think about career paths. It wants to go traveling, it wants to sleep, it wants freshly baked all like croissant in the morning. All of which are great things, by the way, don't get me wrong. but not exactly great business models for your career. But I decided to take the risk and go with my heart anyway. And where I started was here. I spent nearly all my free time cycling to a tree in a field, and just imagine a tree in this green sunny field. There are cows that feel hard wedding, just everything looks amazing. And I was doing that on that by that tree, at least on the surface, seemingly nothing for months, and no social media too. And you get bored of that eventually, so you start wondering oh, that grass looks nice, and oh, what happens if I squish that leaf? And then you squish the leaf and you smell it and you're like, that sounds weird. And then you get even more bored and you start talking with the tree, and then it just rolls on and on and on like that. And after a while, I noticed that the tree looked sick. It had cold, brown, yellow, dry leaves. It had dry bark that smelled like mushrooms. It was peeling off, and I was wondering, are those signs of a fungal infection perhaps? I'm not an expert in tree fungal infections, so I went online and I found an agency called Forest Research UK, and I sent them some samples of the tree, literally leaves and branches. You can do that, apparently. And they came back to me after a while, and they were like, hey, we found 5 strains of fungi in your samples, and it looks like the tree is slowly dying. Which made me really sad, but also really happy, because I felt like I was doing science. I felt like I was helping to identify a disease in the wild, which was just really, really cool. And after a few months of doing this weird side quest of going to that tree, it all led to me finally deciding on my career, and I decided to go into making science and nature documentaries. Now, how, why, I wouldn't exactly be able to tell you. Why do I love somebody? I don't know. I just do. And why did I choose to make science and nature documentaries? I don't know. But what I did know is that what I experienced by that tree helped me learn stuff about the world around me, and it helped me to feel stuff about the world around me too. And it would be a bit sad if I didn't share that with other human beings. Yeah. I found value in ditching the purely intellectual, brain-oriented approach to science, full of lab coats, to one that involved more touching and feeling and seeing and smelling and tasting sometimes. And it kind of reminded me of how my brother and how children engage with the world and with science. And there's this popular experiment in social sciences, a popular test. Well, when they ask children to draw a scientist, and the one thing you can clearly see is that most of them draw men, although the skills are wide, or more children draw women. But what I want to show you is just look at how many lab coats and flasks and glasses and messy hair there is. This is all what children drew. This is what my course mates at university drew. But still, same thing. And that's what comes to people's minds when they think of a scientist, like this Einstein-like figure. And that's the result of the science communication that we have been exposed to. And you might wonder, what's the problem with the brain-oriented lab coat approach to science? Yeah, it might have not been helpful for me to choose my career path, but why is that controversial in, the world? And to that, I will say, trust I believe trust is at the heart of this issue. Some of you who are a bit more into science, and I assume a lot of you are, might wonder, like, why don't people like study the science more? Why don't they trust what the scientists say more? But if the image of science is all about intellect and facts detached from emotions and big institutions doing research that seems too complicated for the average mind to understand, then of course some people will not trust the science, its institutions, and the advice that they give, because they don't feel human enough. At least that's a part of the issue that I see it. And like, there's so much emotion in science. When a lot of the scientists absolutely love talking about the research that they do. For example, I like moss, I have to admit, but when I was talking with a moss researcher, I realized, okay, no, they love moss. And like, that's so wonderful. Like, that infectious, nerdy enthusiasm is one of the best human qualities, in my opinion. And there is so much emotion in science. So much emotion in science. And I believe if we adapt this more of a heart-oriented approach to science, it will be easier to trust. It will be easier to talk about science in society. It will be easier to trust the people who do all of the important research, and science in general will just be more welcoming. The $1,000,000 question is, how do you balance that with keeping science's authority? But I will leave that question open. We need to move beyond the lab coat stereotype and see the person behind the scientist. Just like us, but who spent a lot of time learning about what they do. Now, before I go to the conclusion, one thing I want to say, I'm from Ukraine, and whenever I meet people and tell them that I'm from Ukraine, the usual reaction is your family okay? And my family is okay, luckily, but Ukraine is not, as of today. And every person deserves a right to freedom, peace, and a decent life. Well, we won't get there without help. If governments and people do help, I hope one day Ukraine will also get the luxury of having science as one of our top concerns. Okay, now what is it that I wanted to say with everything that I've been saying today? If there was one thing I would like you to take away from this, it's this. I hope to shift the lab coat, emotion-deprived, like a ray-oriented approach and image of science towards something a lot more real. And I invite the scientists and science communicators to show just a bit more humanness at least in how we communicate the science. You just tried at first to be a bit more human. And I want all of us to be a bit more human too, to mess around a bit more, specifically with science, and to allow yourself to ask dumb questions and find dumb answers until you find something interesting and hopefully less dumb. And just to be silly and mess around with squish leaves, smell them, talk to trees, and go up to someone or do 100 people or so and tell them with pure seriousness that two galaxies stuck together is the biggest butt in the world. Thank you.